Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I've got a lovely lady. Her name is Hara Bloom, and she's living currently in a lovely place called Bali. And I'm so jealous, actually, because it's always been a place that I'd love to visit and love to go to. So hello there, Hara.
Hello, Lyn. Hi. Good afternoon. I know that it's your morning there in Spain, and it's coming towards the end of my evening here in Bali. Sunset time and time for coconuts and beach.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds really wonderful. So, Hara, on today's podcast, we're going to be talking about knowing your self-worth. And I know you've got, a personal story that relates to that. So it'd be lovely for the audience to listen to a little bit more about you and how this affected your life and, what you did to transform and change things for yourself. So just give the audience a little taste of a little bit about what's got you to where you're at right now around knowing your self-worth.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lyn. So, what's got me here is, and why I do the work that I do now is because technically I was my client 7 years ago. When I left England 7 years ago, I was working at the BBC, working in a career that was supposed to be, the key to my happiness. But I was unfulfilled and I had a lot of self-doubt, neglected my authenticity, and constantly looked outside of myself for validation and approval from others, and didn't feel confident in being able to assert my needs and my desires. And I didn't know my own self-worth. And I was in and out of relationships that weren't healthy, and I was constantly overstepping myself and not able to own my boundaries, what I needed and desired. And I knew that something really needed to change. And at this time, my best friend suddenly passed away, which gave me a huge wake-up call, to know that life could be taken away so quickly. And I knew that I needed to be living as, my full self. So I ended up buying a one-way ticket to Australia, spent 4 months in silence living at an ashram, and learned everything I could about myself and to rebuild my self-confidence, my self-worth, and to heal, grow, and evolve into the person I am today.
Wow. And I do think part of the process of getting to the place where we know our own self-worth takes that time alone, doesn't it? More or less not hermiting or cutting yourself off completely, but at least allowing and giving yourself the space and time to allow that time for self-reflection and introspection.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I was so caught up listening to the voices of everybody else. And as I said, I was so used to finding my self-worth and finding my confidence and needing that validation from the outside. And I knew that I had to kind of turn all that noise off from the outside and really go inside of myself to find that within myself and to not continue to make anyone else responsible for that.
Excellent. Love that. So give me some practical insights into what it looked like for you before you did that, what was happening, so that the audience gets some examples of something they might currently be able to relate to that's going on for them right now.
Absolutely. So I can give examples from a few previous relationships. In my previous relationships, I was, finding it really, as I said, I needed validation and approval from my relationship. I really struggled to ask for what I needed. I wasn't able to put my own needs first. So I often put the needs of my partner first, thinking that they were more important than mine. And in the relationship that I'm in now, it's, of course, a lot different to how it was then, because we've evolved and grown and learned together. A prime example of this was I wasn't able to ask for my needs because, the example is that he would be busy at work, and I would passively aggressive say to him, "You never have time for me," and it would come out in that passive aggressiveness because I wasn't able to ask for what I needed, and I wasn't able to express how I was feeling, and I would say, "You never have time for me. You never want to spend time for me." So often at times I was very passive aggressive and didn't get my needs met because I didn't go about it in expressing it the right way.
No, and I think it's very common, isn't it, to point the finger of blame at our partner and actually say, you never or you always, and then whatever it is that you're dissatisfied about. And obviously then they're going to receive it in a way that's going to probably make them be quite defensive, and that's not an attractive trait at all, is it?
No. Yeah, it's as you say, or as I said earlier on, it's about being responsible for ourselves. And I think once I realized that and I stopped looking outside of myself, and realized that only I could do that work and only I was responsible for having my own needs met, then I started to learn myself and actually started to meet my own needs.
Mm-hmm. And also become more of an effective communicator. So rather than, point the finger of blame at your partner and saying you never have time for me or you're always busy or something like that, probably say something along the lines around making it about you and what you want, and say it'd be wonderful to spend more time with you rather than, the way you were communicating previously.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So what did it look like when you were looking for external validation? Could you give the audience some tips around, how you were doing that and what that looked like?
External validation. It was a lot around, it was a lot around my relationships with men, and especially if they would find me sexy and desirable, and if they would want to take me out on a date, for example, that would kind of, what I thought at the time would fill my cup. But of course, that was like the most unhealthy way to grow my confidence and grow my sense of self-worth, because it lived outside of me. So it would often come from, as I said, if a man wanted to go on a date with me, and if a man wanted to make love with me, and if a man wanted to, have me as his girlfriend, then I would feel like, oh, wow, okay, I've done it. And that would be kind of like my confidence boost.
Yeah. No, I get that. I've been through that phase myself. Yeah, definitely. So I just wanted to, as I say, to give a practical example so the audience listening now could think, whether they are in that sort of mindset themselves. Because I firmly believe, there's a choice that we have in any moment, and the choice is either to go with our ego and our head, which is fear, from a place of fear and unworthiness and doubt and worry, or get in tune with our heart and come from a place of love and abundance, and knowing that you are, absolutely amazing, valuable, worthy human being.
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry, are you looking for a different example then?
No. I mean, if you've got other examples, that would be great to share. Just from a point of view of the audience, understanding what things that they might be doing that would be a tick in terms of them looking for external validation in their life rather than knowing it and feeling worthy within themselves.
Yeah, so how this sometimes plays out is kind of, as I talked about, kind of suppressing our own needs and our own desires in order to put somebody else's needs and desires before our own. And how this can look is, for example, we neglect our authenticity, or we shape ourselves and change ourselves in order to fit in order to be liked, in order to get that approval from somebody else. And we, for example, we know our internal value system, but we put our values to one side and don't necessarily stick to our values and what we want in a relationship or what we want out of a life partner, because we we too easily put ourselves to the side. I'm not sure that answers your question.
It does. I think what you're trying to say is that, regardless whether it's a romantic relationship or another relationship, we're coming from a place of people pleasing because we don't feel we measure up, and we're not necessarily consciously aware, are we, that we're doing that, unless we get educated through having these sorts of conversations and get, these messages out there to people. Quite often we're doing this without realizing that that's what we're exuding to others, and that's why we're not getting what we necessarily want or desire in our relationships. So I think it's important to keep sharing these messages, because this is all happening under the bonnet, so to speak, sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I, from my personal experiences, what I've really learned is that for me, the root cause of not feeling worthy and not feeling that inner confidence and not being able to have my needs met and being able to ask for what I need has stemmed for me from my childhood experiences. And that's often what I find in the work that I do with my clients, that, some experiences that you have from your childhood now shape your belief system around why you feel like, for example, your needs are not valid or important, which was the case for me. When I was wanting to spend more time with my partner, but passively aggressive saying, you never have time for me, it's because I didn't feel like, if I asked for what I needed, I didn't feel like that was valid or important. So let's say, for example, as a child, you were always told you were too demanding or too much, and you were shut down by your parents or your caregivers. This could have formed the belief that, having needs is not normal and it's not okay. And then you grew up believing this, and therefore now asking for what you need in your adult life becomes really difficult, and therefore very difficult in your relationships.
I can relate to that completely, because in my childhood, grew up in the sort of 60s and 70s, where my environment was very volatile. My parents argued a lot, and we were shut down. We were literally told kids are seen but not heard. So we didn't feel like we had a voice. Yes, I can absolutely relate to that.
Yeah, I can also relate to that. And just, I feel, my story in particular was that I was always very independent and self-reliant as a child, and very self-responsible, which, and I didn't really, I want to be careful how I say this. I didn't really have the space to have my needs met as a child, because my parents were otherwise engaged in other things and busy. Therefore, for me, it was very, very difficult to ask for what I needed, because I'd always been this self-reliant, I can do it on my own kind of person. And then when I came into my relationships, the relationships that I'm in now, for me, it was very, very difficult to navigate that. And I've spent a lot of time, I guess, uncovering and unpacking all of that and how that has impacted me, and just being a lot kinder and more compassionate to myself with having that knowledge. That's really, really helped me.
I can 100% relate, because I think, these days, obviously it's very common for both parents to work, and I've got no objection with that at all. But quite often, because parents are so busy and don't really have time for their children, if that child is a child that does need that emotional connection, because we all have different love languages, don't we? Yeah. And for my parents, I think their love language was that we're providing, so because they were providers, we never really wanted for much. It's not so we was wealthy, but we was always okay financially. We had, the luxury in those days, which wasn't very common, of going abroad on holidays. We had the luxury of having 2 cars when it wasn't common to have 2 cars in a family. And we had a, a nice home, and never really wanted for anything in terms of, birthday and Christmas presents. But for me, as a child, that physical touch and emotional connection was my love language. It always made me have the belief then that, money or wealth or material things equaled no love.
Interesting. Yeah. And have you been able to kind of, I'm sure, you know, being the age that you're at now, you've been able to really understand that and to work with that throughout your life and been able to kind of transform that thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I have.
Yeah.
You know, it stood me in good stead because I've never really felt any lack where money's concerned, because, you know, it wasn't a lack for me growing up. So it served me there. But what it did do, from a relationship point of view, was, you know, impact my relationships, because I always felt that, you know, and also I suppose my ambition in a way, materialism was never high on my list. But then I realized, you know what, you can create wealth to do good, you know. So my reason for creating wealth is to make a difference and contribute back. It's not about me having luxury items, although that's nice, you know. It is nice to have a nice home and nice things, but it's not a high priority for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a case of reframing things for yourself as to what it actually means to you that's different, and that you know, asking yourself, does this serve me to have this thought or belief, or doesn't it? And if it doesn't, and you're not getting the results you want, then it's a case of looking at it and questioning it and changing it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's, you know, it's that telling yourself a new kind of story. And it's like, although this happened to me in my childhood and this is the experience that I had, I am not that child anymore. And I'm, you know, I am the adult now, kind of looking back on that experience, and how can I empower myself here in this experience so that I can, you know, have experience this life in the fullness of who I am and reach my full potential and have my needs met and have the most juicy and fulfilling relationships. Because when we are able to, you know, to have that confidence and that self-worth and ask for what we need, everything just becomes so much more effortless and graceful, and everything just falls into place.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. And I always used to be mindful of rocking the boat in my relationships. You know, I used to be reluctant to ask for what I wanted, because I know I've said this in previous podcasts, but, you know, as a child, again, you know, I want more or less trained out of me, because, you know, if ever I said I want to my parents, I'd get the response, I want, don't get. So, wow. Yeah, it was, you know, realizing that, you know, it's okay to ask for what you want, but it's a tonality of voice that you use in the way the way you ask for what you want. You know, is it from a place of greed or lack,
yeah,
worry, doubt, or
absolutely.
fear, or is it from a place of, you know what, this is going to really make, you know, fill me up, and it's from a place of love and you know, abundance and desire.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think I said this a little bit earlier or something along the lines, like, it's also in the relationship, it's not anybody else's responsibility to make sure that our needs get met. You know, it's our responsibility to make sure that they are expressed. And also in a relationship, if your needs aren't being met, like some of your basic needs, like safety, security, communication, like whatever it is that you value, if they're not being met, then, you know, maybe it's a case of just asking yourself, does this relationship really align? Does it support you to be the best possible version of yourself? And I think it's also important to remember that having needs is perfectly normal. Like, it's almost like normalizing selfishness. It's okay to be selfish, and it's okay to prioritize ourselves. And that's actually really important. It's something that I have learned a lot, and I have been continually told, you're selfish, you know, you do what you want, you're selfish. And I used to be very, very triggered by that many years ago. And now I embrace that. I say, yeah, I am. And I'm glad that I am, because it's led me to where I am now. And yeah, it's prioritizing self is important.
Yeah, and I don't think it is selfish to be, you know, prioritizing your self-care, you know, because without you being in a position where you, like you referred to, having your cup full, you know, and being responsible for making sure your cup was full, you can't be the best for other people. So, you know, for me, it isn't selfish to be, you know, to look after yourself and prioritize your own self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not. And if you know, if we don't look after ourselves, then no one's going to do it for us. So we have to learn to be that for ourselves, for sure.
And I also want to make it clear that if you are listening to this and realizing that you've made these mistakes for yourself in the past, that it's all normal, you know, don't beat yourself up. You're not alone. We've all done it, haven't we, Hara?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the thing to remember here is that it's a process, and it's a learning, and it's an unfolding, and it's like relearning yourself again, and learning where you're, you know, learning where, for example, you've had experiences in your childhood that may be impacting your ability now to be able to know your worth and ask for what you want, and knowing that we've all had these experiences or some similar experiences, and that it's important to be patient and kind and loving and compassionate with ourselves along the way as we learn and grow, because it's not something that we get taught in school, or it's not something that I learned from my parents. It's something that I've had to go out and to actively learn and to actualize and to implement into my life.
So what sort of lessons have you learned personally then? So, for example, whereby you would have said things like, you never have time for me.
You never want to spend time with me.
Yeah. What would be different now in how you express something like that to your partner?
Oh my goodness, it's so different. And I was, you know, as I was kind of thinking about this topic, and because it's something that I speak to my audience about often, and thinking about where I was, I guess, well, when I met my partner, where I was when I met my partner, it's not something that I had mastered when I met my partner. It's very much happened in the relationship with his support. And we've kind of both been in the trenches and dug ourselves out, you know, together.
Love it.
And yeah, and it's, you know, it's been the most loving and supportive relationship. And he's incredible. And he's been kind of holding my hand through the process. But as I said, it's not something that I just kind of like showed up to the relationship with and like, oh, now I can speak my needs. And, you know, things are different. It's something that we have consciously done in the relationship, and that we both show up to, and that we both keep ourselves accountable for. And the one thing that's really helped me is I've been learning, we call it authentic communication, authentic relating tools, that I have been actively going to workshops for, so that I can bring that back to my relationship and workshop that inside of my relationship, to improve the communication in the relationship. So as before, I would have been passive aggressive, and I wouldn't have been able to ask what I need. And I would say, you never have time for me. And, you know, you're always working. Now it's very different. Now I'm able to recognize what I actually need, before I go out and outwardly, you know, express, and before I'm passive aggressive. So I'm going, okay, I'm noticing that I feel disconnected from my partner, for example. Okay, if I feel disconnected, then what do I need in order to feel more connected to him? Okay, well, I need to express how I'm feeling. So I will approach him and I'll say, hey, I really love, first of all, I ask for like his permission in a way. And I say, I would really love to quickly check in. Have you got a moment to talk about X, Y, and Z? Something's been on my mind. I'm feeling disconnected in a relationship, and I realize right now you might be busy with work. When would be a good time to talk about that? And he might come back and say, I'm available in 5 minutes, or can we talk tonight? So I'm kind of getting his permission to see whether there is space in that moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's important, especially, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
you know, where men are concerned, they're very singularly, more or less, one task at a time focused. So if you are interrupting him at a time when he is focused on something else, it's not a good time to have that conversation, is it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that so resonates. Absolutely. Very my partner isn't the best at multitasking, and he'll say, I can't do all these things at once. And I'll say, but you're just doing this and you're just doing that. So it's not that much. But yeah, the point I guess that I'm trying to make is that, it's choosing the right time to have that conversation. You don't want to have it when he's in the middle of a stressful work situation, or like when he's in the middle of a business call or something like this. So it's choosing the time when he actually has space to be able to hear what you need. So that would be my first kind of approach. And then my second approach would be always, or trying to always, share my appreciation. So expressing something like, what I appreciate about us, what I appreciate about him and our relationships, or something like, I really love you and I would really love it. I'm really grateful to be in this relationship together. And I would really love it if we could spend more quality time together, for example. So first of all, expressing what you appreciate about him, and then comes in about expressing what you would need more of in the relationship. So you would say something like, I would really love it if we could spend one night a week together. And then you would give clear examples. If we could have one night a week where it was just me and you with no phones on it, no laptops. And then I would go so far as like making the request. So it's expressing what you need and then expressing your request, making your request. So you would say something like, how about we have Thursday nights together, just me and you, from 5 p.m. we cook dinner together and we spend the evening doing something nice. How does that sound? Would you like that also? And then you're asking for the feedback. And sometimes you're not always met with the feedback that you would like, or you're not always met with like a straight yes. And sometimes it's a negotiation. It's like, well, Thursday doesn't work for me. How about Friday? And how about we do something different? But this is just a really good framework to use. It sounds a little bit complicated, but once you start getting into the swing of things, it's like showing appreciation for them and what you're enjoying about the relationship and what you enjoy about them, expressing what you need more of, and then making a request. So it's a really simple process. And now I'm at the point where I'm using a process similar to this. Of course, it's different in different times. And it's such a joy to be able to ask for what I want and have my needs met. I feel so empowered in doing so. Whereas before I would have felt very resistant, very shut down, very disconnected from myself and my partner, very unfulfilled in the relationship, but really unable to ask, unable to speak because of this. I didn't, like I said before, I didn't feel like my needs were valid or important, and I didn't feel like they were welcome. So I think that's the importance of doing that, almost that groundwork. That's important to having your needs, to knowing your worth and to having your needs met. I feel that's a really important piece that a lot of us overstep or overlook.
I love that example you get, because it's again, reinforcing that you don't go into the conversation saying you never or you always blah 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 with an accusatory tone of voice, but make it about what you would like. And I love that you said show appreciation before you actually even mention that, because your partner is more open to listening to what you've got to say next if he's been shown appreciation before you actually say how you feel and what you want.
Absolutely.
Whereas, if you're going into that conversation saying you never or you always, that's it, they just shut up and they're not going to listen from that point onwards, are they really? Or if
Absolutely.
they do, they're just going to meet it with defensiveness.
For sure.
Yeah.
And expressing this appreciation in a way is like, in the work that I've done in conflict resolution, it's a perfect tool for conflict resolution in any relationship. When you express to somebody what you appreciate about them, or what you appreciate about the relationship that you're having with them, whether that be your intimate partner or in another relationship, it dissolves so much barriers. And when I've done this in the past, I can instantly feel like the softening of that person, because they feel loved, they feel appreciated, and they feel acknowledged. And it does take that almost that harshness away, or that oh, this is going to be a really serious thing right now. And yeah.
And it makes it safe for them to open up as well, doesn't it? You know, you're creating a safe environment for them to then actually say what they'd want from the relationship too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you learn these tools, I call them tools because that's the only way to kind of talk of them. But when you learn these tools and you bring them into the relationship, like I have done, I said, the trainings that I've done, it's encouraged him to learn the same tools, and it's encouraged him to use the kind of same framework and same languaging. So you can learn and grow together, because as you know, it's a relationship is not a, one of you does the work and one of you doesn't. And, you both have to be in alignment, and you both have to be moving in the same or a similar direction towards what you both want together and what you both want to co-create. You can't be in a relationship with someone, I mean, you could, but you would be, I'm sure, very unfulfilled and very unhappy with someone that isn't willing to meet you in that place of communication and of understanding and of openness to improve the relationship.
Absolutely. It's all about creating that balance so that you're both giving equally to the relationship, and one isn't sort of giving more than the other and feeling, a bit of resentment around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the resentment piece, I remember so much that I would hold on to. I wouldn't express what I needed. I wouldn't express what I wanted. And I would hold on to so much resentment. And then when you hold on to all this resentment, then in 2-3 weeks down the line, it comes out like this crazy ball of fire. And all of a sudden you're in this huge blowing argument, and there's like a lot of tension and a lot of arguments and things like this. But when you do, when you implement these really simple tools in your life, that the resentment goes, because you speak about it within the day, you speak about it in the moment as it comes, and kind of navigate through that experience, as opposed to letting it all backlog. And then you've got all of this kind of, all this backlog of stuff to deal with.
Yeah, because it all builds up, doesn't it, subconsciously, whether we realize it or not.
Yes.
So any final words that you'd like to add before we end up bringing the episode to a close today, Hara? Yeah,
absolutely. So I shared about the communication tools, but I also think it's important to share, as I said, before you kind of start expressing what you need and want, maybe you're at a place where you can actually do that, and you've already done, you've already kind of dug into your childhood experiences. For anyone that's really wanting to start learning to express what they need and want, I would really recommend that, as I say, you do that digging work and you find out what may be impacting your ability to ask what you need and want, and to take the time to learn what your needs are. I think often at times we want our needs to be met by others, and we don't know what we need and want because we've been disconnected from our needs for so long, for as long as we can remember. So actually take the time to get to know what your needs are. And this could be, for example, something really simple as when a difficult moment comes up in your life, or you're going through an emotional challenge, instead of pushing that to one side, that is a clear signal that there is a need. There is a need for your love, your attention, your support. So by identifying that you need something, you begin to acknowledge yourself and recognize that you have needs, and you start to learn yourself better and what your needs are. And then it's much easier to ask what you need from others. So ask yourself, how can I work towards fulfilling my own needs? And how can I recognize what my needs are? And how can I learn? How can I get to know and learn what my needs are? And ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? So just a quick little nugget there for anyone that is wanting to start getting to know what their needs are. Just start by asking yourself those questions. And then once you know what your needs are, then it's much easier to go out and to ask others for what you need, because you're more in touch with yourself and more in touch with what you need and want.
Excellent. love it, and great advice and a great gem of information there. So for those that are very interested, that are listening now, in knowing how they can connect with you, Hara, what is your best contact information?
My best contact information is probably on Instagram. That's the channel I am most active on, and my username is at hara.bloom. Yeah.
Excellent. And for any other information that you'd like to know about Hara, those will be in the show notes. So if you want to connect via any other means, then Hara's information, as always, where the guests are concerned, is always in the show notes. So that just leaves me to say thank you so much, Hara. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And thank you for being so vulnerable enough to share your own personal experiences relating to the subject of knowing your self-worth. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lyn. Thank you for having me.
So on that note, it just leaves me to say, as always, true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.